What's good, football gamers? It's your boy Fenn checking in with another College Football 25 YouTube video. And in this one, I'm going to show you how to predict with near certainty whether or not you're going to be able to land a recruit pretty much as soon as you put them on the board. I've seen enough of these progressions by now to have noticed a pretty simple formula that centers around your comparative influence level with other schools and your pipeline tier. Recruiting successfully really does just boil down to not wasting your hours and spending them efficiently. There is no greater waste of hours than spending them on a prospect who doesn't sign with you. So this video will be about eliminating that culprit, wasting less hours, and being able to accurately forecast whether or not you're going to be in the running for a given prospect. And while burning hours completely on recruits you don't wind up signing is certainly the biggest culprit that we're going to address here, in my opinion, scouting falls under that same bucket as an inefficient use of hours. By the same token, trying to max out arrows rather than hours, also an inefficient use. We've done the necessary testing, and outside of a hard sell on a well-graded pitch, it is always just about the amount of hours that you spend and never the arrows. Right before we get into your keys for reading the board in College Football 25 and predicting your results, we should mention that the devs have told us very specifically and explicitly that there is meant to be an element of chance to keep things dynamic and exciting in recruiting, but in dynasty mode at large. They've told us that part of the intention is that two people playing the same mode on the same team would have a pretty notably different experience between the two files. So while during this video I might talk in some more certain terms, it's important to remember that they want things to be a little bit freaky sometimes, and it is by design. Things like a closely competing team beating you to a hard sell or unveiling interest earlier than you can, or maybe being able to schedule a visit before you could, can all swing balance in these close matchups. But you can still shoot a really high percentage on forecasting your results accurately and knowing when to hold them and when to fold them. The toughest part is sometimes you're just going to need to take your medicine and take a recruit off your board that you really would have loved to bring to town. And I think that's where most of us light many of our hours just on fire, is in the search for guys we know deep down, based on how we're reading the board, we're not likely to land, but we're shooting for the moon anyway. These tips should help you make those decisions earlier, save as many hours as you can, and stay always be recruiting. Hope you enjoy. Okay, all right, I'm checking in with the congregation. 4-hour walkthrough of keys on how to read this board is to just be able to tell right off the rip whether or not you're going to be in the mix or not, and save yourself the hours if you're not. I'm going to show y'all a few recruits that were definitely likely to land, and we know this very early. We just got out of the preseason and out of the offering scholarships phase, where you could just do the scholarships and the scouting, set up the board, but we haven't spent any hours yet. I'm just going to go through kind of a critical reading of everyone we have on our board here to see whether or not they should remain so. So like I said, we're going to show a few recruits that were likely to land, a few recruits that we are not at all likely to land, some examples of guys that'll kind of be like a coin flip, and how to tell the difference between all of them. So let's start with your best case scenario for predicting success, which is both a pipeline and a relative influence advantage. This means that if you keep your hours maxed on this prospect, nobody's going to be able to catch you. Like we said earlier, luck on visits or interest uncovered or something like this, getting to a hard sell faster or slower, can foil even like the most solid of locks, but this is about as safe as they come. If you keep your hours maxed out in this situation, nobody has the juice to catch you. So in probably the clearest of examples, with both an influence and a pipeline tier advantage, this is going to be all systems go here for Damian Lewis. Fire away, you have an excellent chance to land him. And before we get all too deep into it, we'll be talking about pipeline tier a lot here. It's one of the best indicators on how this will all go for you. I know most of you understand it pretty well, but a good analogy is kind of thinking of the recruiting process like a race. Your pipeline tier is the size of the engine that you're running this race with. So in this case, with both the biggest engine you can have out of 5 and starting with the lead, there's just no way that we wind up losing this race outside of crashing our car, which would be taking hours off of him, or some other way that we sold. The race is pretty much ours to lose, and the same is true for this recruiting race for Damian Lewis. Next example is also pretty clear and comparable, as it's just a lead, but we do not have a pipeline advantage. Notably though, we also don't have a disadvantage. In a closer matchup like this, where we only have our current lead to forecast with, things like getting to the hard sell quickly and scoring well there could swing this either way. So while we can't go so far as to call this 5-star gem, Dane Isaac, a lock, the odds are certainly in our favor to land him if we do wind up keeping his hours maxed. So I'm hearing you out. All right, well done, Fenn. You've let us know that you can land people that you're already in the lead for, and I'm hearing you out. Fair enough. We're working from most certain to least certain, okay? Here we go, Mr. Santiago Westerman. And though for this gentleman, we are obviously in second place, so we don't have an influence advantage right now, we also outrank the pipeline tier, in this case by 3. The leaders with a pipeline tier of 2, and our highly powered vehicle here, a pipeline tier of 5. A little bit further down the board, you could see some other tier 5s that have some influence with this guy, but nobody has offered him a scholarship yet. So it kind of reverts back to the last situation of we can't really get outpaced, A, and B, we're going to be able to outpace whoever's in front of us pretty drastically with this much more powerful pipeline tier that we have to their level 2. I had this Georgia template kind of already loaded up from some of the experimentation we were doing from the coach boosting. Make sure you guys check out that video if you haven't, but you can make these same considerations whether you're comparing your tier 5 influence level or your tier 2, 3, the comparative analysis between where you're at and essentially how big your recruiting engine is in the form of the pipeline tier. You have to just translate that depending on what your pipelines look like and whether you have tiers to be doing this with as well. So in this case, Westerman feels like even safer of a chase than Dane Isaac did with how this board reads, so we may well have flipped those two guys around. As we start to work toward less certain, our boy Gerald Henderson here is going to be nearly a coin flip, despite the fact that we're showing for being in first place and we don't have a pipeline disadvantage like we mentioned before. It's just too close to an equally powerful pipeline tier to feel like we should really dump a ton of resources into this. But what we do know, though, is even a week of Alabama spending less than the maximum hours on this guy would create an advantage for us. So although it's a gamble, with a high relative star athlete that we're trying to get to town like this guy, this may well be worth the chase, and just hope that Alabama takes their foot off the gas even for a second. If they do, you'll probably be in business. And now as our circumstances get a little darker, here goes Kane Penna, where we're showing for a pretty encouraging 5th place here early on. The influence bars are pretty tight, top to bottom, so on first glance, you might feel like this could be a dogfight that you might actually come out on top of. I am here to tell you how unlikely that would be. You can see that all 4 of the schools that are ranked above us in current influence also have a pipeline tier advantage. They're 5 for all 4 of those schools to our 3. There is almost no hope whatsoever for you to ever land this recruit, no matter how hard you fight, how bad you wanted it, how many hours you wind up cooking before you find that out. At this juncture right now, you already know that there is a near 100% chance that this guy should be off your board and you could look for something else and better odds elsewhere. While nothing is impossible, this is not a smart gamble to take. Take him off your board. In a kind of similar situation to the last guy, here goes this 5-star D tackle Enrique Skaggs. While on first glance, you see, oh, we're in second place with influence. The bars are relatively tight. Feels like we might be able to catch LSU here. But again, because you know that LSU has already offered a scholarship, so they will be in on this race, and you are giving away 3 cylinders on your car as far as power that you don't have that LSU does, there is almost no chance that you're going to be able to land Skaggs if LSU even halfway recruits them. They are getting superior boost for everything that they do, and you are getting far, far less help. So while it might be painful, there's no way this guy should ever be on your board. You could take him off now and cut your losses. And then kind of on the negative side of the coin flip balance, we have here James Masiflio, right end, out of Memphis, Tennessee. 5-star guy. We would love to get him to town. We are showing for an even pipeline with Duke up at 1, which makes us feel like we can probably be dancing here. If Duke takes their foot off the gas for even a second, we would be able to make that up. They're not competing with a better engine than we are. In this case, we're almost reading this board as though we are in second contention. No matter what South Carolina does, if we max out our hours, we will outpace them and make up that difference. So you could almost read this like you're already in second place. From there, like we said, it's going to be about a coin flip. You're going to need Duke to take their foot off the pedal. pedal and max out your odds, you would need to keep his hours maxed out and get to a good hard sell as quickly as you can. And with what we know here, we could speed run the rest of our board and see what we like. Hocker is going to stay on our board. He got a scholarship from the U, but we have equal pipeline tier. If we trust ourselves to be able to deduce that hard sell a little bit early and we could beat you to the punch there, I think our odds are pretty good. B. Sullivan, we have a lead, and our next competitor has the same pipeline tier as us. It's safe. We can't take our foot off the gas, though. He stays. Next up, a pipeline advantage. We're the only one to offer a scholarship. I bet this guy might be a bust, just to find out. A lot of times, guys that don't wind up getting a scholarship, it's because they're busted. Oh, come on, man. Come on. Hype me up, chat. What did I say? Don't use scouting, though. Don't use scouting. Like I said at the top, I do believe, unless you're in a situation like Georgia where you just have thousands, if you're playing at schools that most of us are playing at and you don't have that much overage of hours, scouting outside of the preseason is a highly inefficient use because it's more about just landing the recruits and dealing with what you got than maxing out a couple points or a development trait here and there. You just want the bodies. So especially at smaller schools, don't scout, but it's kind of a tell when they don't wind up with a scholarship elsewhere, or if they get a bunch of scholarships, more than you feel like they should based on their star rank, that might be a gem, just something to look out for. Called that 10 miles away, but the short story for our question is we could land this guy if we wanted him, and for a 4-star, bust or not, might be worth our while. Good for silver here too, pipeline advantage and an influence advantage. 2 for 2, safest they come. James Ryan can probably come off of our board. We have equal pipeline tier, but we're giving away a disadvantage to both Florida and Miami. Makes me feel like we should bail out here completely. I would take him off of our board despite being close and already showing for top 3. It's not one that feels that good. Our odds here are really low of landing this guy. Our boy Fitelli here, high chance to land. Only other game in town looks to be that tier 1 from Army. We got a tier 5. We land this if we want it, no problem. This guy winds up being a coin flip between too many excellent programs for me to feel good with. We're about even influence with everybody else, but we don't have a pipeline tier advantage that's going to get us back in the mix. Even if we keep this maxed out on hours, essentially our pedal to the metal, we have 1, 2, 3 chances of other schools being able to do the same thing, not to mention Florida, Florida State, and Bama being able to get into the mix with already some pre-existing influence on this guy and a super powerful pipeline tier. The only person we're not worried about here is Virginia Tech, but this just winds up being a toss-up between too many equally powerful rivals for us, and I feel like your chances are going to be pretty low. Sills winds up in a very similar boat, just too many powerhouses in town. It's going to fall down to whether you can get to the hard sell quickly. If you wind up attached and you were able to do some preseason scouting and you like a guy in a situation like this, you can just try to force the hard sell, really do everything you can to bend over backwards, but mostly a coin flip, and there's a lot of entrants too. But this one is going to come down to some RNG between too many opponents for me. You could probably stand to get him off your board too. Our guy Tavares Mayer here never should have been on our board whatsoever. Oh, you're in the top 8 though, Fend. We have a pipeline disadvantage to every single other person on the board who has all gotten scholarship offers, and he's got a bunch. Easily we could bail out on right now. He's got an offer from a 3 pipeline tier. We can't be dancing with that. Take him off the board. It's a waste of your time. Daniel Hag comes off your board too. We're giving away a pipeline tier disadvantage, and our influence is nowhere near where it's going to need to be. Oregon or USC wind up signing him. Slater never should have been our board on the first place. We have no chance at this despite being top 5. We're really not top 5. 4, 4, 2, and 2 to our 0 pipeline tier. Get him off your board. Josh Aaron, get out of here. Alex Colon, no shot. Jamie Goldwire, why are you here in the first place? Spencer Blunt, a little bit of life here is going to be between Georgia, Florida State, and Miami. You're giving away an influence disadvantage, but you got an equally powerful car. If you love this guy, Blunt, you could put your hat in the ring, stay on max hours, and hope one of those Florida schools takes their foot off the gas even for just but a second. Maybe. And I wanted to show one pretty rare example of a guy you might want to roll on, or just at least a board situation that you might come across at some point to take note of. We have a 4 pipeline tier level with this guy, Taylor Riggins. You can tell just next to Auburn, Alabama, right there listed as his hometown. We have a 4. There are no pipeline tier 4s on this entire board, but we're obviously not on the board. if we were to get on the board and we were to keep our levels maxed out, we would likely have enough time to catch these top 2 schools because we have a better pipeline tier than them. So if you wanted to get involved with this guy for whatever reason, even though you're not showing for on the board at all, based on what you know now about how to read this and how to kind of forecast where you can get involved with, it would be a longer game and you would need to make his first cutoff at 8. But if you loved him, you could put some hours on him to try to make that big jump with the help of your big pipeline tier. So I hope this gave you some cues to look out for as you move week to week on how to read your recruiting board to best predict whether or not you're ever going to be in the mix at all. Save yourself some headaches, cut your losses when you have to, and only spend hours on recruits that you can land. I'll remind you one last time about the intended certainty in Dynasty mode. So while you might start with the lead in a pipeline tier level difference and everything is going your way, apparently sometimes it just is not meant to be. But the point is to have fun with the process. Hopefully this helps you do just that. Predict some better outcomes, save your hours, recruit on. I've been Fenn, y'all been great. Can't wait to see you next video. Peace.